March 4th, 1945. A frozen field near the Oder River, east of Berlin. The air smells of pine smoke and diesel fumes. It is a smell that has clung to everything for weeks, the scent of a long, desperate retreat. 20-year-old Helferin Helga Schmidt huddles in the back of an Opel Blitz truck, her fingers too numb to properly grip the bakelite casing of her field telephone. The vehicle lurches, its worn tires slipping in the icy mud, and for a moment the canvas flap lifts. Outside, a landscape of skeletal trees and churned earth flashes past in a smear of gray and white. The sound is a constant, low growl, the approaching thunder of Soviet artillery, a sound that is no longer distant, but a physical pressure against your eardrums. She is a signals auxiliary, a Blitzmädel, one of the thousands of young women tasked with keeping the Wehrmacht's lines of communication from fraying into silence. But now, the lines are silent. The men of the Ninth Army are no longer retreating in order. They are dissolving. A sharp crack, louder than the rest, echoes from somewhere ahead. The truck driver, a boy no older than herself with hollows under his eyes, curses and slams on the brakes. The vehicle skids sideways, its engine screaming and then dying with a pathetic cough. Ahead, the column of trucks and half-tracks has stopped. Men are spilling from the vehicles, rifles held loosely, their faces turned towards the west. There are no officers shouting orders. There is only the wind, whipping through the bare branches of the forest, and the relentless, grinding sound of tank treads chewing up the frozen ground. It is not the familiar clatter of a Panzer IV. It is something heavier, deeper. Helga pulls her thin wool coat tighter, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She exchanges a look with the other two women in the truck, Ilsa and Katya. No words are necessary. They have all heard the stories of what happens when the Red Army arrives. You can feel the vibration through the soles of your boots now. The ground itself is trembling. A man up ahead begins to run, a single, panicked figure breaking from the paralyzed group. He doesn't get 10 paces before a burst of machine gun fire, a rapid, guttural chatter cuts him down. He falls without a sound, a dark shape against the snow. Then they appear. Emerging from the tree line like prehistoric beasts, the low, wide silhouettes of T-34 tanks. Their long 85mm cannons seem to sniff the air before pointing directly at the stalled German column. Behind them, infantry spread out, their winter smocks making them ghosts against the snow. The red stars on their helmets, the only fleck of color in this monochrome world of fear. A white flag, a dirty piece of undershirt tied to a stick, is raised from one of the trucks. Then another. The defiance has bled out of them, leaving only a cold, pragmatic desire to live another hour. Helga watches as Soviet soldiers, their faces grim and chapped by the wind, move down the line of vehicles, yanking open doors and pulling Germans out onto the road. Their Russian is a torrent of harsh, incomprehensible commands. They are not gentle. Hands are raised. Rifles and sidearms are thrown into a growing pile in the mud. Helga feels a rough hand grab her arm and pull her from the truck. She stumbles, landing on her knees in the slush. The cold seeps instantly through her trousers. She looks up into the face of a young soldier, his eyes as gray and hard as the winter sky. He gestures with the muzzle of his PPSH-41 submachine gun. Get up, move. She is herded with the others, a shuffling, defeated mass of gray uniforms. She has become a prisoner of war. The world she knew, the world of duty, switchboards, and the faint patriotic hope for a final victory, has ceased to exist in the time it takes for a tank to crest a hill. The journey west is over. A new one, into an unknown and terrifying east, is just beginning. May 17, 1945. A repurposed factory complex outside Oischut, Netherlands. The war in Europe is over. The world celebrates. But for Helga Schmidt, the world has simply shrunk to the dimensions of a barbed wire enclosure under a perpetually overcast sky. The initial chaos of capture by the Soviets had given way to a new, orderly kind of imprisonment. She and several hundred other female auxiliaries, nurses, and administrative staff were eventually handed over to the British Army during the chaotic confluence of forces in central Germany. Now, she is prisoner number 734 in a British-run civilian internment camp. The factory's vast brick buildings, once used to manufacture textiles, have been converted into cavernous dormitories. 3-tiered wooden bunks line the walls, each a small private kingdom of misery. The air is thick with the smell of damp wool, unwashed bodies, and the thin, carbolic soap issued once a week. There is no privacy. You sleep, eat, and despair in the constant company of 200 other women. A typical day begins before dawn with the harsh scrape of a guard's boot on the gravel path outside. Roll call. They stand in neat rows in the muddy yard, shivering in the morning mist, as a British sergeant with a weary face calls out their numbers in heavily accented German. 731, 732, 733. Here, here, here. The monotony is a drug, dulling the sharp edges of fear and uncertainty. After roll call comes breakfast, a mug of weak ersatz coffee that tastes of roasted acorns, and a single dense slice of black bread. The rest of the day is a vast empty expanse to be filled. They are assigned tasks: peeling potatoes in the cavernous kitchen, mending clothes in the sewing room, cleaning the latrines. The work is tedious but welcome. It is a defense against the slow madness of inactivity, a way to keep your hands busy while your mind screams with unanswerable questions. Where is her family? Is their apartment building in Berlin still standing? Her brother, Stefan, was with the Grossdeutschland division, last seen fighting in East Prussia. Is he alive? Is he a prisoner like her? Or is he lying in an unmarked grave somewhere in that cursed land? The camp is a microcosm of a defeated Germany. There are the pragmatists, like Helga, who focus on surviving one day at a time. There are the unbreakables, like Frau Richter, a stoic head nurse in her 50s who organizes singing circles and secret history lessons to maintain morale. And there are the fanatics, a small group of younger women, former BDM leaders, who still whisper about secret weapons and the eventual triumph of the Reich. They hold themselves apart, their faces etched with a bitter, hollow pride. They are a reminder of the ideology that brought them all to this place. Arguments flare up over a stolen crust of bread or a perceived insult, small sparks of tension in a pressurized environment. But mostly, a shared sense of loss binds them together. In the evenings, huddled on their bunks, they talk, not of the war, but of home. They describe the taste of their mother's Apfelstrudel, the scent of the linden trees on their street in summer, the specific creak of a familiar floorboard. These memories are their most precious currency, traded back and forth in hushed tones after the lights are out. It is an act of defiance, a refusal to let the past be completely erased by the barbed wire and the bleakness of the present. One afternoon, a rumor, the lifeblood of any prison, begins to circulate. It starts as a whisper in the laundry room and quickly becomes a desperate hope shared throughout the barracks. The Red Cross. They have brokered an agreement with the camp authorities. A delivery of mail, the first since the surrender, is expected. The air in the camp changes. The usual lethargy is replaced by a palpable nervous energy. For weeks, they have been ghosts, cut off from the entire world. Now, a fragile bridge is being built back to the life they once knew. Helga dares not let the hope take root too deeply. Hope, she has learned, is the cruelest torture of all. June 2nd, 1945. The main yard of the Oerschot internment camp. The sky is a sheet of brushed aluminum. A cold wind rustles the leaves of the poplar trees growing just beyond the wire, a sound of freedom that has become a form of torment. Today, the routine is broken. The usual work details are canceled. After the morning roll call, the women are not dismissed. They are told to wait. They stand in their loose formations, hundreds of them, a sea of gray-green coats and anxious faces, their collective gaze fixed on the camp commandant's office. The rumor has proven true. 2 canvas sacks stamped with the iconic Red Cross sit on the steps of the small wooden building. For nearly an hour, they wait in silence. The only sounds are the wind and the nervous shuffling of feet on the gravel. This is a new kind of battle, a silent, internal one fought against the twin armies of hope and despair. To receive a letter is to know, but to know could be worse than the uncertainty. To not receive one is to be left adrift, to remain a ghost. Finally, a British officer, a young captain with a clipboard, emerges from the office, followed by the weary sergeant. The captain clears his throat, his voice carrying in the tense quiet. He explains the process. The letters have been censored, both by the German authorities before they were sent and by the Allied authorities upon arrival. He will call out a name. The prisoner will step forward, state her number, and receive her mail. Then she is to return to her place. There will be no disorder. He begins to read from the list. Our, Gisela. A thin woman from the nursing corps steps forward, her face pale. Nummer 418. She takes the thin envelope with trembling fingers and walks back to her spot, clutching it to her chest as if it were a holy relic. The captain continues, his voice a dispassionate drone. Bachmann, Eva. Becker, Laney. With each name, a wave of relief and envy washes through the crowd. You watch the faces of the women who receive their letters. Some close their eyes, pressing the paper to their lips. Others stare at the handwriting on the envelope, their expressions unreadable. For every name called, there are 20 left unspoken. Helga feels her throat tighten. She scans the faces around her. Ilse is biting her lip, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Katja stares at the ground as if unwilling to watch. Schmidt. It is such a common name. There must be one. Please, let there be one. The list is getting shorter. The pile of envelopes in the sergeant's hand dwindles. Despair begins to creep in, cold and familiar. Helga starts to prepare herself for the disappointment, to build the necessary walls around her heart. It was foolish to hope. Her family is in Berlin. Berlin is a ruin, a city divided and occupied by the Soviets. How could a letter possibly find its way from that heart of darkness to this cage in Holland? Richter, Anna. Frau Richter steps forward, her back straight, as dignified as ever. She accepts her letter with a curt nod. The captain looks at his last few sheets. He seems to be nearing the end of the S's. Helga holds her breath. Schmidt, Helga. The sound of her own name is a physical shock, a jolt that travels from her ears to her stomach. For a moment, she cannot move. Ilse nudges her, whispering, "Go, that's you." Helga walks forward on legs that feel like they belong to someone else. The world narrows to the gravel path beneath her feet and the figure of the British captain. Nummer 734, she says, her voice a dry rasp. The sergeant hands her the letter. It is a single, flimsy envelope, grayed and creased from its long journey. It feels impossibly light, yet carries the weight of her entire world. She turns it over. The handwriting is instantly, awkingly familiar. It is her mother's elegant, slightly slanted script. Tears blur her vision, hot and sudden. She doesn't wipe them away. She returns to her place in the ranks, her eyes fixed on the name and address scrawled in faded blue ink. On Helga Schmidt, care of the International Red Cross. It exists. She exists. Someone at home still knows her name. She finds a quiet corner of the yard, her back against the cold brick of the factory wall, and takes a deep, ragged breath, her fingers fumbling with the seal. The paper is so thin, you can almost see through it. It is covered in her mother's handwriting, every square inch filled to save space, the lines cramped together. Before Helga can even begin to read the words, she sees the black marks. Thick, brutal lines of the censor's ink crossing out entire sentences, leaving behind gaping wounds in the text. What news was too dangerous, too demoralizing to be allowed through? What secrets are hidden beneath that black veil? Her eyes jump to the top, to the date, April 10th, 1945. It was written nearly 2 months ago, before the final apocalyptic battle for Berlin, before the surrender, before the end of the world. She begins to read. Meine liebste Helga, it starts. My dearest Helga, we received your card from February. To know you are alive and unhurt is the only thing that keeps us going. Relief floods through her, so powerful it makes her dizzy. They got her message. They know she is alive. Her mother's words are careful, chosen to navigate the prying eyes of the censors. She speaks of the constant loud noises and the long nights spent in the cellar with the neighbors. Helga can read between the lines. The relentless Allied bombing raids, the air thick with dust and the smell of fire, the ground shaking as if the world were coming apart. Her mother writes that their building is, miraculously, still standing, though all the windows are gone, replaced by cardboard. Frau Bauer from next door lost her youngest son, Hans. He was in the Kurland pocket. A simple statement of fact, devoid of emotion, yet it speaks of an ocean of grief. Then, the first major redaction. A long paragraph is completely blacked out. It comes just after a mention of her brother, Stefan. The sentence before the black ink reads, "We had a letter from Stefan's Feldwebel," and the sentence after is, "We pray for his soul." Helga stares at the black line. It is a tombstone on the page. She doesn't need to read the missing words. She knows. Stefan is gone, killed somewhere in the frozen hell of the Eastern Front. A sob escapes her, a raw, ragged sound she cannot control. She presses her fist to her mouth, biting down on her knuckles to stifle the noise. The letter continues, a surreal blend of catastrophe and domesticity. Her mother mentions the food situation. "The turnips are plentiful this year," she writes, a phrase so loaded with bitter irony that it makes Helga's stomach ache. It means there is nothing else. No bread, no meat, no potatoes, only turnips. The hunger in the camp, the meager rations she had cursed, suddenly feel like a feast. She reads about her father, a man in his late 50s, now conscripted into the Volkssturm, the last desperate defense of the city. He is stationed at the Anhalter Bahnhof, armed with an old French rifle and a handful of cartridges. A grandfather sent to fight against Soviet tanks. The image is so grotesque, so pathetic, that it feels like a scene from a nightmare. The censor's ink appears again and again, slicing through the narrative, leaving her to piece together the horror from the fragments left behind. Your cousin Gerda's husband did not return from redacted. The authorities told her he was redacted, and we are not to speak of it. A deserter? A political dissident? The possibilities are chilling. The letter is not a lifeline. It is a chronicle of the abyss. It confirms every fear she has harbored in the dark and introduces new ones she could never have imagined. Then, nestled at the end, is a single, devastatingly simple sentence. The old rosebush under your window, the one Papa always threatened to dig up, has survived everything. It has 3 new buds. This is what finally breaks her. The thought of that stubborn, fragile spot of color blooming amidst the rubble and the ruin. It is a symbol of a life that is gone forever. The tears come freely now, silent, hot tracks down her face, dripping onto the precious, heartbreaking paper. She looks up through the blur, at the wire, the guard towers, the gray sky. This place, this cage, is no longer the worst place on earth. The worst place on earth is home. A figure approaches her. It is Katja, her face white, her eyes wide with a strange, terrified light. She is holding her own letter. She stops in front of Helga and whispers, her voice cracking. "They're saying it in the letters, from everyone. Helga, the Führer, he is dead." The news of Adolf Hitler's death, confirmed by letters from a dozen different cities, is not a single, sharp blow. It is a slow-acting poison that seeps into the foundations of the camp's fragile society. It arrives intertwined with the intimate, personal tragedies of each letter. Stefan is dead. Papa is gone. Our city is rubble. And the man who promised a 1,000-year Reich is dead in a bunker beneath it all. The news doesn't spark riots or celebrations. It creates a profound, unnerving stillness. The fanatics, the true believers, withdraw into a state of catatonic shock. Their worldview has not just been defeated, it has been vaporized. They sit on their bunks, staring at nothing, their faces blank masks of disbelief. For others, like Helga, the news is simply another layer of loss, another anchor cut loose. The cause she had served, the nation she had been taught to love, the entire structure of her world was built around this one man, and he was gone. What did that make her? Not a soldier for a cause, but a functionary for a failed regime. Not a prisoner of war, but a remnant of a national suicide. In the days that follow, the surrender of Germany is announced by the camp commandant. The war is officially over. But instead of relief, a deep, collective anxiety settles over the women. Their status has changed. They are no longer enemy combatants to be guarded, but displaced persons to be administered. The British Guards, once figures of authority and menace, now look at them with a mixture of pity and impatience. The rigid camp routine begins to fray. Work details become optional. Roll calls are less frequent. The structure that had given their days a grim purpose is dissolving, and into the vacuum rushes a terrifying uncertainty. What happens now? Where will they go? The letters have told them that home is a place of starvation, ruins, and foreign occupation. Many of the women are from the east, Prussia, Silesia, Pomerania, lands that are now part of Poland or occupied by the Soviets. For them, there is no home to return to. They are truly adrift, citizens of a country that no longer exists on any map. Helga reads her mother's letter again and again, until the creases in the paper are as soft as cloth. The words change with each reading. The news of Stefan's death is no longer a sharp shock, but a dull, constant ache. The image of her father with his antique rifle becomes a symbol of a whole generation of men sacrificed for nothing. But it is the line about the rosebush that she clings to. That small, stubborn detail becomes her focus. In a world of epic destruction and ideological collapse, it is the only thing that feels real. A rosebush, 3 buds. It is a tiny, fragile promise that life, in some form, continues. The letter, which had at first felt like a chronicle of death, now feels like a testament to survival. Her mother survived. Her father, at the time of writing, was still alive. They were enduring the unimaginable. The letter is no longer just a message. It is a mandate. It is a command. One evening, she sits with Frau Richter, the old nurse, watching the sunset behind the wire. They don't speak for a long time. Finally, Frau Richter turns to her, her face tired but resolute. "We are not soldiers anymore, Helga," she says softly. "We are witnesses. We must remember what was lost, but we must also learn how to build again." Her words hang in the cooling air. Building. The idea seems impossible, ludicrous. How do you build on a foundation of ash? Helga looks down at the lap at her mother's familiar, steady handwriting. She thinks of the cellar, the turnips, the cardboard windows, and the rosebush. Perhaps you do not start with a grand design. Perhaps you start with a single, tiny bud. She looks out past the wire, not at the Dutch countryside, but at an unknown future. The war is over. The silence it has left behind is deafening. And in that silence, she must learn to hear a new sound, the first faint whisper of what comes next.